Ruby dust clouds billowed behind Willow Sullivan's wagon as she fled the man who had stolen everything from her, including the one thing no one had a right to take, her dignity. The year was 1878, and the Arizona Territory was as unforgiving as the memories that chased her across the barren landscape toward Superior, a mining town where she prayed no one would know her name or her shame. Blood trickled from her split lip as she snapped the reins, urging her exhausted horse forward. The setting sun painted the distant mountains in hues of orange and purple, a beauty that felt like a cruel joke against the ugliness she'd endured. 3 days ago, she'd been the respectable daughter of a rancher. Now she was running with nothing but a wagon of hastily packed belongings and a heart hardened by betrayal. "Just a little further, Penny," she whispered to the chestnut mare. "We'll make it to Superior by nightfall." The silhouette of Superior emerged on the horizon, a jumble of wooden buildings and mining structures nestled against the base of Apache Leap Mountain. As Willow approached, she rehearsed her story in her mind. She would be a widow, seeking a fresh start. No one would know about Randall Porter, the wealthy cattle baron who had courted her with gentlemanly promises, only to reveal his true nature when she rejected his advances. The wagon rolled down the main street as darkness fell. Lantern lights spilled from the windows of saloons and boarding houses, and the sounds of piano music and raucous laughter filled the night air. Willow pulled her wagon to a stop outside what appeared to be a respectable hotel, the Mountain View Inn. "Need some help with that, madam?" Willow startled at the deep voice. A tall man stood beside her wagon, hat tipped low over his eyes. His appearance was rugged, with a sun-weathered face and clothes covered in trail dust, but something in his stance suggested strength rather than threat. "I'm fine, thank you," Willow replied, her voice firmer than she felt. Her hand discreetly moved to the small derringer hidden in the folds of her skirt. The man stepped back respectfully. "Just offering assistance. Name's Jackson Garrett. Most folks call me Jax." "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Garrett, but I can manage." Willow climbed down from the wagon, wincing as her bruised ribs protested. The man's eyes narrowed, noticing her pain and the poorly concealed bruise on her cheekbone, but he asked no questions. "Fair enough. If you're looking for a place to stay, Mrs. Henderson runs a clean boarding house just down the street. Bit cheaper than the hotel, and her cooking's worth twice the price." Willow nodded her thanks, relieved when he tipped his hat and turned away. She watched him walk toward the saloon, his spurs jingling with each step. Only when he disappeared through the batwing doors did she release the breath she'd been holding. The boarding house was exactly where Jackson Garrett had said it would be. A neat, 2-story building with curtains in the windows and potted geraniums on the porch. Willow secured her horse and wagon in the adjacent stable before approaching the front door. Mrs. Henderson proved to be a plump, gray-haired woman with sharp eyes that took in Willow's battered appearance without comment. "Rooms $3 a week, meals included," she stated. "No gentlemen callers, no drinking, and no coming in after 10. I run a respectable establishment." "That sounds perfect," Willow replied, reaching for the small purse tied at her waist. "I'm a widow traveling to join my cousin in California. I'll only be staying a week or 2. The lie tasted bitter in her mouth, but it was necessary. She couldn't tell anyone the truth that Randall Porter had attempted to force himself on her after she declined his marriage proposal. And when she fought back, he'd beaten her and promised to ruin her family's name if she ever told a soul. Rooms at the top of the stairs, first door on the right, bathrooms down the hall, breakfast at 6, dinner at 6. You're on your own for lunch. Mrs. Henderson handed her a key. "And miss, whatever trouble you're running from, it usually finds a way to catch up." Willow's heart stuttered. I'm not. Save it for someone who hasn't seen that look 100 times before. The older woman's face softened slightly. Superior's full of people starting over. You won't be the first, won't be the last. That night, Willow barely slept, startling at every creak of the boarding house timbers. When dawn broke, she made her way downstairs to find 3 other boarders already at the breakfast table: an elderly schoolteacher, a young clerk from the assayer's office, and, to her surprise, Jackson Garrett. He looked different in the morning light: cleaner, his jawline freshly shaved, though his eyes still held the hardness of a man accustomed to frontier life. He stood when she entered, a courtesy that reminded her painfully of the world she'd left behind. "Morning, madam. Didn't introduce myself properly yesterday. Jackson Garrett." He extended his hand. "Willow Sullivan," she replied, accepting his handshake briefly before taking a seat as far from him as possible. "Mrs. Henderson served a breakfast of hot cakes, eggs, and bacon that reminded Willow how little she'd eaten in the past days. Despite her desire to remain inconspicuous, she found herself wolfing down the food. "What brings you to Superior, Mrs. Sullivan?" the clerk asked conversationally. "Miss," she corrected, sticking to her rehearsed story. "I'm traveling to California, just passing through." "Dangerous journey for a woman alone," the schoolteacher remarked, peering at Willow over wire-rimmed spectacles. Jackson Garrett said nothing, but Willow felt his eyes on her, observing, assessing. After breakfast, Willow ventured into town. She needed work if she was going to save enough money to continue her journey, or perhaps stay, if Superior proved to be the haven she sought. The town was bustling with activity. Miners heading to their shifts, merchants opening shops, wagons delivering supplies. She tried the general store first, then the dressmakers, and finally the small restaurant beside the hotel. Each time, the answer was the same: no positions available. By mid-afternoon, desperation began to set in. Her savings wouldn't last long, and without work, she'd have no choice but to move on, or worse, return home. As she exited the telegraph office, her 5th rejection of the day, she nearly collided with Jackson Garrett. "Any luck?" he asked, steadying her with a gentle hand on her elbow. Willow stepped back from his touch. "How did you know I was looking for work? Small town. Word travels." He gestured down the street. "There's an opening at the Silver Dollar. Owner's looking for a new barmaid." Willow's chin lifted defiantly. "I am not working in a saloon. It's respectable enough. No funny business. Harlan doesn't allow it." Jackson's expression remained neutral. "But suit yourself. Just thought you might be running short on options." He was right, of course. She was running short on options, but working in a saloon would be the final nail in the coffin of her former life. No respectable woman would consider such employment. "Thank you for the information," she said stiffly, "but I'll find something else." Jackson shrugged. "Suit yourself. Though if you change your mind, I can put in a good word. Harlan and I go back a ways." Before she could respond, a commotion erupted down the street. A group of riders was approaching, dust billowing behind them. Something about the lead rider's silhouette made Willow's blood freeze in her veins. "Excuse me," she murmured, ducking quickly into the nearest store, a milliner's shop filled with fancy hats she could never afford. Through the window, she watched as the riders drew closer. 5 men, all wearing the Double P brand of Porter Ranch, and at their head, Randall Porter himself. "No," she whispered, backing away from the window. "No, no, no. Are you all right, dear?" The milliner, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, approached her. "You've gone white as a sheet." "I'm fine," Willow managed. "Just feeling a bit faint. May I sit down for a moment?" "Of course." The woman guided her to a chair. "Is there someone I can fetch for you?" "Your husband, perhaps?" Willow shook her head. "No, thank you. I'll be fine in a moment." Through the window, she saw Porter and his men dismount in front of the hotel. He was scanning the street, his handsome face set in lines of determination. Looking for her, she knew with certainty. "Actually," Willow said, rising shakily to her feet, "I think I need to return to my boarding house. I'm not feeling well at all." She slipped out the back door of the shop and took a circuitous route to Mrs. Henderson's, heart pounding with each step. By the time she reached the boarding house, she was trembling so badly she could hardly fit the key in the lock to her room. Once inside, she sank onto the bed, mind racing. Porter had found her. Somehow he'd tracked her to Superior. She needed to leave immediately, but where would she go? How far would she have to run to escape his reach? A knock at her door made her jump. "Miss Sullivan," Mrs. Henderson's voice called. "There's someone here asking after you." "A Mr. Porter says he's an old family friend." Willow's throat constricted with terror. "Please," she whispered, not loudly enough for Mrs. Henderson to hear, "please tell him I'm not here." Another knock, more insistent. "Miss Sullivan, are you in there?" Gathering her courage, Willow approached the door but didn't open it. "Please tell Mr. Porter that I don't wish to see him." There was a pause, then Mrs. Henderson's voice again, lower this time. "Is he trouble, girl?" "Yes," Willow admitted, the word barely audible. "Wait here." Willow pressed her ear to the door, straining to hear. Muffled voices drifted up from downstairs, then the unmistakable sound of Porter's voice, rising in anger. The front door slammed, and silence fell. Minutes later, Mrs. Henderson's footsteps returned. "He's gone for now," she said through the door. "But he didn't look like a man who gives up easily. Said he'd be staying at the hotel until you came to your senses." Willow's legs gave out and she slid to the floor, back against the door. Porter was here. He wouldn't leave without her. And if he couldn't persuade her to return with him willingly, he would use force or worse, make good on his threat to destroy her family's reputation. As darkness fell, Willow made a decision. She couldn't stay, but she couldn't leave town either, not with Porter and his men watching the roads. She needed help, much as it galled her to admit it. When the boarding house grew quiet, Willow slipped downstairs and out into the night. The Silver Dollar Saloon was easy to find, its windows blazing with light, the sounds of music and laughter spilling onto the street. Taking a deep breath, she pushed through the batwing doors. The noise dimmed momentarily as several heads turned to look at her, but quickly resumed. Willow scanned the crowded room until she spotted Jackson Garrett at a corner table, engaged in a poker game. She approached hesitantly, aware of the curious glances cast her way. "Mr. Garrett," she said when she reached his table. "Might I have a word?" Jackson looked up, surprise flickering across his face before his expression settled back into its usual impassivity. "Gentlemen, I'll sit the next hand out," he said, gathering his chips and standing. He guided her to a quieter corner of the saloon, signaling to the barkeep, who brought over 2 glasses of whiskey without being asked. "I didn't expect to see you in here," Jackson commented, sliding 1 glass toward her. Willow ignored the drink. "I need your help." "I figured as much." He took a sip of his whiskey. "This about the men who rode in today, the ones you were hiding from." She stiffened. "How did you?" "Saw you duck into Millicent's shop fast as a jackrabbit when they appeared." His blue eyes held her steadily. "One of them looking for you, I take it?" "Yes, Randall Porter, he's—" Willow hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. "He's not a good man, despite what people might think. He's dangerous. And he's got an interest in you." It wasn't a question. "He wanted to marry me. I refused. He didn't take it well." The understatement of the year, but Willow couldn't bring herself to say more. Jackson studied her face, taking in the fading bruise on her cheek, the healing split in her lip. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "He do that to you?" Willow's eyes dropped to the table. "Yes." A heavy silence fell between them. "I need to leave Superior," she finally said, "but Porter and his men are watching the roads. I don't have anywhere else to go or anyone to turn to. I thought, maybe you could help me get out of town safely." Jackson took another sip of his whiskey, considering. "I could. But running doesn't solve problems like Porter. Men like him, they don't stop until they get what they want. What choice do I have? Stay and wait for him to force me to go back with him? Or worse, you could fight." Willow gave a bitter laugh. "Fight? He's one of the most powerful men in the territory. I'm a woman alone with nothing but the clothes on my back and a few dollars to my name." "You're not alone now." Jackson's voice was quiet but firm. "What did he take from you, Miss Sullivan, besides the obvious?" The question caught her off guard. "What? When a woman runs like you did, there's usually more to it than a few bruises, bad as they are. What else did he take?" The dam inside her broke. "He took my pride," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "My dignity. My belief that I could protect myself. My trust." Jackson nodded slowly. His hand moved across the table, not quite touching hers. "Then I'll guard what's left like treasure." Willow stared at him, taken aback by both the offer and the conviction behind it. "Why would you help me?" "You don't even know me." "Know enough." He finished his whiskey. "Know you're in trouble. Know Porter's type seen it before. Men who think their money and power give them the right to take whatever they want. I can't ask you to put yourself at risk for me. You're not asking, I'm offering." Jackson leaned forward. "Here's what we're going to do. You go back to Mrs. Henderson's, pack your things. I'll come for you before dawn. Got a place outside town where you can stay while we figure things out. And Porter, let me worry about Porter for now." Against her better judgment, Willow found herself nodding. There was something about Jackson Garrett that inspired trust, despite her vow never to trust a man again. Perhaps it was the calm confidence he exuded, or the way his eyes held no hint of deceit. "Thank you," she said simply. He escorted her to the door of the saloon. "Dawn," he reminded her. "Be ready." Willow slipped back to the boarding house, mind whirling with questions. Was she making another mistake, trusting this virtual stranger? Or was Jackson Garrett exactly the ally she needed? She packed her meager belongings and lay down fully clothed on the bed, too anxious to sleep. Outside, Superior slumbered under a blanket of stars, unaware of the drama unfolding in its midst. True to his word, Jackson arrived before the first light of dawn. A soft knock at her window startled her from a fitful doze. He was on the porch roof outside her window, a finger to his lips. Willow grabbed her bag and climbed out onto the roof beside him, following as he led her to a ladder propped against the side of the building. "Porter's got men watching the front," he whispered when they reached the ground. "But they're not the most alert bunch. Been at the whiskey most of the night." He led her to where two horses waited in the alley behind the boarding house. "Can you ride?" he asked, helping her secure her bag to the saddle. "Since I was a child," she replied, mounting with practiced ease despite her skirts. They rode out of town via a back trail that skirted the main road, keeping to the shadows until they were well beyond Superior's limits. As the sun crested the horizon, Willow felt the first stirrings of hope. Maybe, just maybe, she had found a way out of her nightmare. Jackson's place outside town turned out to be a modest cabin nestled in a small valley, with a stream running nearby and cottonwood trees providing shade. A corral held several horses and a weathered barn stood adjacent to the cabin. "It's not much," Jackson said as they dismounted, "but it's quiet. No one comes out this way much." "It's perfect," Willow replied honestly. After days of fear and uncertainty, the isolated cabin seemed like a sanctuary. The interior was simple but clean: a main room with a stone fireplace, a small kitchen area, a table and chairs, and a single bedroom visible through a doorway. Willow hesitated, suddenly aware of the impropriety of the situation. Jackson seemed to read her thoughts. "I'll be staying in the barn," he said. "Plenty comfortable out there. This place is yours as long as you need it." "I can't take your home, it's not really my home," he interrupted. "Just a place I use when I'm not on the trail. I'm gone more than I'm here." "What exactly do you do, Mr. Garrett?" He smiled slightly. "Bit of this, bit of that, some ranching, some hunting, some tracking." He moved to the fireplace, stoking the banked coals. "Lately, been working as a scout for the cavalry and sometimes the sheriff when they need an extra gun." "You're not?" Willow hesitated, not wanting to offend him. "An outlaw." He glanced over his shoulder, amusement in his eyes. "Not anymore. That was a long time ago and I paid my dues. These days, I stay on the right side of the law." The admission should have alarmed her, but strangely it didn't. There was an honesty in his acknowledgement of his past that Willow found refreshing after Porter's veneer of respectability that masked a monster. "I should get back to town," Jackson said, straightening. "Need to make sure Porter doesn't suspect where you've gone. There's food in the pantry, water from the stream is clean for drinking. Keep the doors locked. I'll be back by nightfall." After he left, Willow explored the cabin. Despite its simplicity, there were touches that spoke of Jackson's character: books on a small shelf, carefully mended clothes in the chest of drawers, a guitar in the corner. This wasn't just a place he used occasionally. It was a home he'd made for himself. She spent the day cleaning to distract herself from worry, sweeping floors and washing windows until the cabin gleamed. When exhaustion finally overtook her, she lay down on the bed, telling herself she would rest for just a moment. The sound of hoofbeats woke her with a start. Darkness had fallen, and for a panicked moment, Willow thought Porter had found her. She fumbled for the derringer in her skirt pocket, moving to the window. Relief flooded her when she recognized Jackson's silhouette in the moonlight. He dismounted wearily, leading his horse to the barn. Moments later, he knocked at the cabin door. "It's me," he called softly. Willow unlocked the door, noting immediately the tension in his face. "What happened?" "Porter's offering a reward for information on your whereabouts. $50 enough to tempt a lot of folks in town." He removed his hat, running a hand through his dark hair. "And he's been telling a story. Says you're his fiancée, that you had some kind of nervous breakdown and ran away." Anger flashed through Willow. "That's a lie. I never agreed to marry him. When I refused him, he—" She trailed off, the memories too painful to voice. "I figured as much." Jackson hung his hat on a peg by the door. "Problem is, Porter's well-respected, got money influence. People are inclined to believe him. And not me, a woman they don't know. Some might believe you if they heard your side." Willow shook her head vehemently. "I can't. I won't tell people what he did. It's humiliating enough without making it public knowledge." Jackson didn't press the issue. "Brought some supplies," he said, changing the subject. "And sent a telegram to a friend of mine, former marshal over in Tucson. He might have some ideas on how to handle Porter legally." The thought of confronting Porter in any capacity made Willow's stomach churn. "I just want him to leave me alone, to forget about me." Men like Porter don't forget easily, especially when they think someone's made them look foolish. Jackson's expression darkened. "And from what I heard in town today, he's got a reputation for holding grudges." "What else did you hear?" "That this isn't the first time a woman's had troubles with him. There's been talk, whispers. Nothing substantial enough for the law to act on, but enough to make me believe your version over his." Willow wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly chilled despite the warm evening. "What am I going to do? I can't hide forever." "No, you can't." Jackson's gaze was steady. "Sooner or later you'll have to stand your ground." "I tried that once," she said bitterly, gesturing to her fading bruises. "Look how well it turned out. Next time you won't be alone." The simple promise hung in the air between them, a lifeline Willow desperately wanted to grasp but feared to trust. She'd believed in promises before, only to have them shattered. "Why are you doing this?" she asked again. "Really? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything." Jackson was silent for a long moment, his eyes holding a shadow of old pain. "I had a sister once, Emily. She got involved with a man like Porter, wealthy, charming on the surface. By the time we realized what he was really like, it was too late." His voice roughened. "I wasn't there when she needed me. I won't make that mistake again." The raw honesty in his admission struck Willow to the core. This wasn't about gallantry or misplaced heroics. This was about redemption, about preventing another tragedy. "I'm sorry about your sister," she said softly. "It was a long time ago, but some lessons stay with you." He moved toward the door. "I'll be in the barn if you need anything. Try to get some rest." For the next 3 days they settled into an uneasy routine. Jackson would ride into town each morning, returning with supplies and information. Porter remained in Superior, growing increasingly agitated as his search for Willow yielded nothing. He doubled the reward and added threats to the mix, promising consequences for anyone harboring her. Willow found herself drawn to the quiet strength of the man who had become her protector. Jackson Garrett was nothing like the men she had known, neither the polished gentlemen of her social circle nor the rough cowboys who worked her father's ranch. There was a depth to him, a complexity that fascinated her. On the 4th evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Jackson broke the companionable silence. "Porter's men are widening their search. They were asking questions in the outlying homesteads today." Willow's heart sank. "It's only a matter of time before someone points them this way." "Probably." He didn't sugarcoat the truth. "We need to decide what to do." "I could leave the territory," she suggested, though the thought of starting over again, alone in an unfamiliar place, filled her with dread. "You could. But that's not really solving the problem, just postponing it." Jackson turned to face her. "There's another option. We go back to Superior together, confront Porter openly." "That's madness. He'd never admit what he did. It would be my word against his." "Maybe not just your word." Jackson reached into his pocket and withdrew a folded paper. "This came today from my friend in Tucson. Seems Porter's had complaints against him before. 3 women in the last 2 years. None willing to press charges, but all with similar stories to yours." Hope and fear warred within Willow. Even if that's true, what difference does it make? Without formal charges, it's still just rumors against his reputation. Sometimes rumors are enough to make a man like Porter back down. He values his standing in society above all else. If there's a risk of scandal, a public accusation with multiple women backing it. Jackson let the implication hang. Willow considered the possibility. Could she find the courage to face Porter, to speak the truth publicly? The thought made her tremble, but the alternative, a lifetime of looking over her shoulder, was equally daunting. "I need time to think," she said finally. "Of course," Jackson stood, "but not too much time. Porter's getting desperate, and desperate men make dangerous choices." That night, Willow couldn't sleep. She paced the small cabin, weighing her options. Return to Superior and confront Porter, risking his rage but perhaps ending the nightmare once and for all. Or flee further, living in fear but safe from immediate danger. A sound outside the cabin froze her in mid-step. A horse's soft nickering, not from the direction of the barn where Jackson's gelding was stabled. Someone was approaching. Heart pounding, Willow grabbed her derringer and moved to the window, carefully parting the curtains. In the moonlight, she could make out 3 riders advancing slowly toward the cabin. "Jackson," she whispered urgently, then remembered he was in the barn. She had to warn him. Slipping to the back door, Willow eased it open, intending to run to the barn. But before she could step outside, a figure loomed in the doorway. "Hello, Willow." Randall Porter's smooth voice sent ice through her veins. "Did you really think you could hide from me?" Willow raised the derringer, but Porter was faster, knocking it from her hand. It clattered to the floor as he shoved her back into the cabin. "You've led me on quite a chase," he said, closing the door behind him. "Very inconsiderate, especially after all the trouble I went to, courting you properly." "There was nothing proper about what you did," Willow spat, backing away. "You attacked me when I refused you." Porter's handsome face hardened. "I offered you everything: wealth, position, my name, and you threw it back in my face. What did you expect? Not to be beaten and assaulted?" Her voice rose despite her fear. "Keep your voice down," Porter hissed. "My men are outside, but this is between us. Now you have two choices. Come back with me willingly as my fiancé and we'll forget this unfortunate episode. Or make a scene and I'll drag you back anyway after dealing with that cowboy you've been hiding with." Willow's blood ran cold. "Leave Jackson out of this. He has nothing to do with it." "Oh, I think he has everything to do with it." Porter's smile didn't reach his eyes. "You've been living here unchaperoned for days. Your reputation is already in tatters. The only way to salvage it is to accept my offer." "I'd rather die," Willow declared. Porter's face contorted with rage. He lunged forward, grabbing her arm with punishing force. "That can be arranged, you ungrateful." The distinctive click of a revolver being cocked interrupted him. "Let her go, Porter." Jackson stood in the doorway, his gun trained on Porter's head. Now, Porter didn't release Willow. "You're outnumbered, Garrett. My men are currently indisposed." Jackson's voice was deadly calm. "Had a feeling you might come calling tonight. Left a little surprise for your boys. They'll live, but they won't be joining us for this conversation." Uncertainty flickered across Porter's face. His grip on Willow's arm loosened slightly, and she wrenched herself free, moving to Jackson's side. "This doesn't concern you, Garrett," Porter said, his composure returning. "This is between me and my fiancée." "She's not your fiancée." Jackson's aim never wavered. "And it became my concern when you put hands on her the first time." Porter's expression turned calculating. "You know who I am, what I can do. I own half the cattle in this territory. One word from me and you'll never work again. Might even find yourself in prison on some trumped-up charge." "You don't scare me, Porter." Jackson took a step forward. "I've known men like you my whole life. All hat, no cattle, as they say. Big men until someone stands up to them." Rage colored Porter's face. "You filthy saddle tramp. You think she'll choose you over me? Over everything I can offer her? I already have," Willow interjected, finding her voice and her courage. "I chose the moment I ran from you, Randall. I will never be yours." Porter's hand moved to his waistband where a small pistol was concealed. Jackson saw the movement and fired, his bullet grazing Porter's arm. The cattle baron howled in pain, clutching his bleeding limb. "Next one goes through your heart," Jackson warned. "Now, here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave Superior. Tonight. You're going to forget Willow Sullivan exists. And if I ever hear you've hurt another woman, I will find you, and our next meeting won't end with just a scratch." "You can't do this," Porter snarled, but there was fear in his eyes now. The law might be interested in those other women you've assaulted," Jackson cut him off. "The ones in Tucson and Bisbee. Sheriff Tanner's got their statements now. He was mighty interested to hear their stories matched Miss Sullivan's so closely." Porter's face drained of color. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Jackson's gaze was unwavering. "Want to find out?" For a long moment the two men stared at each other, the air thick with tension. Then Porter's shoulders slumped slightly. "This isn't over," he said, but the threat sounded hollow. "Yes, it is," Jackson replied. "Now get out before I decide you're not worth the bullet I'd waste on you." Porter backed toward the door, clutching his wounded arm. "You've made a powerful enemy, Garrett. Wouldn't be the first time." Jackson kept his gun trained on Porter until the man disappeared into the darkness. Only when they heard the sound of horses galloping away did Jackson lower his weapon. Willow sagged against him, the adrenaline draining from her body. "Are you all right?" he asked, his arm coming around her shoulders to steady her. "I think so." She looked up at him, overwhelmed with gratitude and something deeper, something that had been growing during their days together. "You saved my life." "You saved your own life when you ran from him," Jackson corrected her. "I just helped finish what you started. You think he'll really leave?" "Give up so easily?" Jackson's expression was grim. "Not easily, no, but he will leave. Men like Porter value their reputations above all else. The threat of exposure of scandal is more effective than any bullet. And those other women, is that true?" "Yes. My friend in Tucson found them." They were too afraid to come forward before, but when they heard there might be another victim willing to speak out, they agreed to give statements. "Porter knows his game is up. He'll move on, find somewhere else to hunt." Relief washed over Willow, so profound it made her knees weak. "Thank you," she whispered, "for believing me, for helping me, for everything." Jackson's hand came up to touch her face gently, his calloused fingers brushing the last traces of her bruises. "No man has the right to take a woman's pride," he said softly, "or her dignity." The tenderness in his touch, in his voice, broke something inside Willow, not the breaking of damage, but the breaking of a wall she'd built around her heart. Tears filled her eyes, and for the first time since her ordeal began, she allowed herself to weep freely, without shame or fear. Jackson held her while she cried, his strong arms a shelter rather than a cage. When her tears finally subsided, she became acutely aware of their closeness, of the steady beat of his heart beneath her ear. "I should." She began, starting to pull away. "Stay," he murmured, "if you want to." Willow looked up, meeting his gaze. What she saw there wasn't pity or desire or calculation. It was something far more rare and precious: respect, admiration, and yes, the beginnings of love. "I want to," she replied simply. In the days that followed, they settled into a new rhythm. Though Porter had left Superior as promised, neither of them felt entirely safe returning to town immediately. Instead, they remained at the cabin, each day bringing them closer, weaving their lives together thread by thread. Jackson taught Willow to shoot his revolver properly, his hands guiding hers as she learned to aim and fire with increasing accuracy. Willow, in turn, brought warmth and order to his Spartan cabin, transforming it into a true home with her presence. They spoke of their pasts: Jackson's troubled youth, his time riding with an outlaw gang, his redemption through the intervention of a marshal who saw potential in him, Willow's sheltered upbringing on her father's ranch, her mother's early death, her determination to forge her own path despite society's expectations. And slowly, hesitantly, they began to speak of a future: tentative plans, dreams shared in the quiet of evenings spent on the porch watching the stars emerge. 1 month after Porter's departure, they returned to Superior together. The town had largely forgotten the excitement of the cattle baron's visit and his mysterious, urgent departure. Mrs. Henderson welcomed Willow back with knowing eyes but no questions, and Jackson resumed his occasional work for the sheriff. They married in the small church on a bright October morning, with Mrs. Henderson, the sheriff, and a few others as witnesses. Willow wore a simple blue dress rather than traditional white, a choice that raised a few eyebrows but felt right to her. This wasn't a conventional beginning, and she had no desire to pretend otherwise. "You sure about this?" Jackson asked as they stood outside the church, moments before the ceremony. "Marrying me means a life without the comforts you grew up with. Willow took his hands in hers. "I've never been more sure of anything. Comfort isn't worth much without love and respect. You've given me both, along with something I thought was lost forever." "What's that, my pride?" she said softly. "And my trust." Jackson's smile, rare and brilliant, was all the answer she needed. Life as Mrs. Jackson Garrett wasn't easy. They split their time between Superior and the cabin, with Jackson taking scouting jobs that sometimes kept him away for weeks. During those absences, Willow discovered her own strength, managing alone and even starting a small business selling preserves and baked goods to locals. When word came that Randall Porter had indeed left Arizona Territory entirely, retreating to his family's holdings in Texas, they celebrated with a rare bottle of champagne, and the knowledge that this chapter of their lives was truly closed. 2 years after their wedding, as spring painted the desert with wildflowers, their son was born, William Jackson Garrett, named for Willow's father and his own. Watching Jackson hold their child for the first time, his weathered face transformed by wonder and love, Willow knew that her greatest treasure was this family they had created together. 3 years later, they welcomed a daughter, Emily, named for Jackson's lost sister. By then, they had purchased a small ranch outside Superior, where Jackson raised horses and Willow kept a thriving vegetable garden. Their home became known for its hospitality, a safe haven for travelers and those in need. On the 10th anniversary of their meeting, as they sat on their porch watching their children play in the yard, Willow reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. "You ever think about it?" she asked. "That night at the Silver Dollar when I came to ask for your help?" Jackson nodded, his arm around her shoulders. "Often, especially the words you said. He took my pride," Willow remembered, "and I promised to guard what was left like treasure." Jackson's voice was soft with memory. "Little did I know that you were the real treasure I'd been searching for my whole life." Willow leaned against him, content in the knowledge that some treasures, once found, only increase in value with time. Her pride, once shattered, had been restored not just by Jackson's protection, but by her own courage and resilience. What Randall Porter had tried to destroy had instead become the foundation of a life filled with love, purpose, and joy. As the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Willow silently thanked the twists of fate that had brought her to Superior and to Jackson Garrett. The path had been difficult, marked by pain and fear, but it had led to this: a home, a family, a love worth more than all the cattle in Arizona Territory. "Mama, Papa, look!" 5-year-old William called, pointing to the first star appearing in the evening sky. Jackson squeezed Willow's hand. "Make a wish," he murmured. Willow smiled, watching her children's eager faces as they searched for more stars. "I don't need to," she replied. "I already have everything I could wish for." And as night fell over their small piece of the vast Arizona wilderness, the Garrett family gathered close, guardians of a treasure far more precious than gold: the love and respect they had built together. A fortress no outside force could breach, a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. Years passed, and Superior changed with them. The mining boom eventually waned, but the town persevered, adapting to new circumstances just as Willow had adapted to hers. The Garrett Ranch thrived, becoming known throughout the territory for its fine horses and Jackson's expertise as a tracker and guide. Their children grew strong and independent, inheriting their mother's determination and their father's sense of justice. William showed an aptitude for ranching from an early age, shadowing his father's every move, while Emily revealed a quick mind that led her toward education, eventually becoming Superior's schoolteacher after studying in Tucson. When news reached them that Randall Porter had died in a gambling dispute in El Paso, Willow felt no joy, only a quiet closure. The man who had once held such power over her life and thoughts had become irrelevant, a distant memory that no longer had the ability to cause pain. "Are you all right?" Jackson asked that night, noting her contemplative mood after the news. "Yes," Willow replied honestly. "I realized I haven't thought about him in years. He has no power over me anymore, hasn't for a long time." Jackson nodded, understanding as he always did. That's the truest victory. On their 25th wedding anniversary, the entire town of Superior gathered to celebrate the couple who had become pillars of the community. The old Silver Dollar Saloon, now a respectable establishment renamed the Garrett House in their honor, hosted the festivities. As they danced beneath paper lanterns strung across the ceiling, Jackson held Willow as carefully as he had on their wedding day. 25 years, he marveled. Sometimes it feels like yesterday I found you hiding in Millicent's hat shop. Willow laughed, the sound as free and joyous as it had been rare in their early days. "And sometimes it feels like I've known you my entire life." "In all the ways that matter, you have," he replied, his blue eyes still capable of making her heart skip a beat after all their years together. Later that evening, as guests began to depart, Mrs. Henderson, now well into her 80s but still sharp as ever, approached them with a small package. "I've been saving this," the old woman said, pressing the parcel into Willow's hands. "Thought tonight was the right time." Inside was a journal, its leather cover worn with age. Willow opened it curiously to find Mrs. Henderson's neat handwriting filling the pages. "I've kept track of everyone who's passed through my boarding house over the years," the elderly woman explained. "The stories they brought, the lives they lived. Yours is one of my favorites, from that terrified girl who arrived with bruises she tried to hide, to the woman who stands before me now." Tears pricked Willow's eyes as she scanned the entry from that long-ago day. Mrs. Henderson had seen everything, understood everything, from the moment Willow had stepped into her boarding house. "Thank you for your kindness when I needed it most," Willow said, embracing the woman who had been her first ally in Superior. "We women have to look out for each other, Mrs. Henderson replied simply. "And you've done the same for plenty of others over the years." It was true. The Garrett Ranch had become known as a safe haven for women in difficult circumstances. Willow had helped dozens of women start new lives, drawing on her own experience to offer both practical assistance and understanding. Some stayed in Superior, while others moved on to opportunities elsewhere, but all carried with them the knowledge that they were not alone. As they rode home that night, the desert bathed in silver moonlight, Jackson took Willow's hand. "I've been thinking," he said. "Maybe it's time for us to take a trip, see some of those places we've talked about all these years." "You mean it?" Willow asked, surprised and delighted. Though they'd often spoken of traveling, the demands of the ranch and raising children had always kept them close to home. "William can manage the ranch now," Jackson said. "He's more than ready. And Emily's settled with her teaching. There's nothing holding us here except habit." The prospect of adventure, of experiencing new places with the man she loved, filled Willow with excitement. "Where would we go first? How about San Francisco? You've always wanted to see the ocean." "The ocean," Willow repeated dreamily. "Yes, let's do it." 3 months later, they stood on a cliff overlooking the Pacific, the endless expanse of water stretching to the horizon. The wind whipped Willow's hair, now streaked with silver, around her face as she breathed in the salty air. "It's more magnificent than I ever imagined," she said, awed by the power and beauty before them. Jackson stood beside her, his arm around her waist. Though time had etched lines on his face and slowed his step, His eyes still held the same steadfast strength she'd first seen in the Silver Dollar Saloon. "Worth the wait?" he asked. "Everything worthwhile is," she replied, thinking not just of the ocean but of their life together, the challenges they'd overcome, the love that had grown deeper with each passing year, the family they'd built, the legacy they'd created. They traveled for 6 months, from the redwood forests of California to the bustling streets of Denver, collecting experiences and memories to carry back to Superior. When they returned home, they brought stories and souvenirs that delighted their grandchildren, William's 2 boys and Emily's daughter, who listened with wide-eyed wonder to tales of their adventures. Life settled back into its familiar rhythm, but with a new appreciation for the world beyond their corner of Arizona. They hosted frequent dinners for friends and neighbors, sharing their experiences and encouraging others to explore beyond the boundaries they'd set for themselves. As they entered their golden years, Willow and Jackson spent ever more time on their porch, watching the desert sunsets and reminiscing about the path that had brought them together. Their hands, worn and wrinkled now, still sought each other's instinctively, the connection between them as strong as it had ever been. "You have any regrets?" Willow asked one evening as they watched the first stars appear. Jackson considered the question carefully, as was his way. "Only that I didn't find you sooner," he finally replied. "All those years before we met seem like wasted time now." "Not wasted," Willow corrected gently. "They made you who you were when I needed you most. If you'd been different, if I'd been different, we might have passed like ships in the night." "Always the wise one," Jackson said with a smile, squeezing her hand. On their 50th anniversary, too frail now for a large celebration, they sat together in the home they'd built, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and even 2 great-grandchildren, the newest additions to their legacy. William had expanded the ranch into one of the most successful operations in the territory. Emily had written a book about Arizona's history that was being used in schools throughout the West. Both had married well and raised children who carried forward the Garrett values of courage, integrity, and compassion. As the family gathered around them, sharing stories and laughter, Willow looked at Jackson and saw in his aged face the same man who had promised to guard her remaining pride like treasure. He had kept that promise and given her so much more, a life of dignity, purpose, and boundless love. That night, as moonlight spilled through their bedroom window, Jackson took Willow's hand. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" she asked, turning to face him on their pillow. "For trusting me when you had every reason not to trust anyone, for building this life with me, for these 50 years. Willow touched his cheek, tracing the familiar contours of his face. "Thank you for showing me that what was broken could be mended, that what was lost could be found again." In the soft light, they looked at each other with the same wonder they'd felt decades before, 2 souls who had found in each other exactly what they needed, when they needed it most. As dawn broke over the mountains the next morning, Jackson Garrett passed peacefully in his sleep, Willow's hand still clasped in his. The man who had spent his life guarding treasures, first his own redemption, then Willow's wounded pride, then their family's legacy, had completed his watch. Willow lived 3 more years, surrounded by family and the memories of a life well lived. In her final days, she often spoke of Jackson as if he were still beside her, sometimes smiling at an empty chair or laughing at a joke only she could hear. "He's waiting for me," she told Emily the night before she died. "He promised he would." They buried her beside Jackson on a hill overlooking the ranch, with a view of the mountains they had both loved. The simple headstone bore their names, the dates of their lives, and words chosen by William and Emily. They guarded love like treasure, and in doing so became the richest of souls. Decades passed. Superior changed with the times, the old mining town evolving into a place both familiar and different. But the Garrett Ranch remained, passing down through generations, a living testament to what can grow from courage, resilience, and love. And sometimes, on clear desert nights when the stars shine like diamonds against the velvet sky, locals swear they can see two figures walking hand in hand along the ridgeline above the ranch, a cowboy and his lady, forever guarding the treasure they found in each other's hearts.